Shalom, brothers and sisters. Shalom, brothers and sisters. Giving honor and praise unto the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth, the Most High. We want to sit there and get into this particular teaching, brothers and sisters, for edification purposes. This presentation is due to the unfortunate attacks made on the continent of Africa, the continent that holds millions, that holds many millions of people. Though not everything is perfect in any part of Africa, I, a person who has worked with people from Africa, want to take you on a short tour of the Africa that is not mentioned by many people, too many people. All right. So this particular presentation, brothers and sisters, all right, called "The Hating of Africa Must End, O House of Israel." Now, the reason why, brothers and sisters, I called it this is because there seems to be, yes, unfortunately, believe it or not, a great deal of quote hating on Africa itself. And the guy who was a rapper that came from East Africa, namely Eritrea, who unfortunately was murdered, I began to see, brothers and sisters, that the hatred that is spilt upon Africa by many, not all, but by many people who know and understand themselves as Israel was a very sad and unfortunate case. All right. I've heard Israelites over the course of years speak as say, oh, they not no stinking African, they not no effort African, and so forth and so on. Now, the reason why you hear that in most cases is not because of the whole issue of Scipio Africanus and whether or not it was named by a white man in honor of a white man and so forth and so on. The Israelites, for the most part, who sit there and bash Africa, don't do it because of the oppression that Africa goes through by the European or by the oppression that other Africans put upon other Africans. All right? So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. Okay? So, brothers and sisters, without any further ado, let us continue in this particular aspect. In Golan, all right? What, brothers and sisters, are we looking at here for edification purposes and reasoning? This is a woman on the left-hand side from Angola, all right? And what we're looking at on the right-hand side is pictures from Angola. Now, Angola, brothers and sisters, is like in the eastern part of Africa, all right? And it's in part below the equator. So what we want to point out in this particular aspect, brothers and sisters, is that there are places in Africa that unless you understood it to already be Africa, you would have perhaps looked at that top picture on the right-hand side and would have said, oh, it must look like somewhere in Ohio or somewhere in California or somewhere of that kind of sort. Meanwhile, brothers and sisters, that is actually as stated in continental Africa, namely in a place called Angola. Okay? When you go into the book, brothers and sisters, that is called Valley of Dry Bones by Rudolph Windsor, right? In that book, brothers and sisters, he spoke about there being Israelites that came out of the place that we call Angola. All right? There were many people from Angola taken during the Atlantic slave trade to the place that we call Brazil today. So these are certain things, brothers and sisters, that we just want to point out for edification purposes. All right? Next slide, please. Ghana, business center and bank. Now, what you're looking at on the left-hand side is what a depiction of what they call the Ashanti golden stool. All right? That is to be said to this day that it, correct me if I'm wrong, sits and resides in England. Just as much as they took people out of Africa, brothers and sisters, so did they take the gold and the gems and the jewels also out of Africa. You understand? So this is, as been pointed out, something we want to go over and show for edification purposes. How is it, brothers and sisters, this day? All right, you have it to where people are negotiating the objects that don't even sit there and belong to them, such as we see in the case with the golden stool of the Ashanti people that's in Ghana. Right now, what you're looking at, brothers and sisters, on the right hand side is a picture of Ghana in today's time. Okay, so this is something, once again, that we want to point out and show for edification purposes. Okay, are there any questions or comments concerning what we have gone over? Let us continue. James Kwame Otieku or Otiku. Pardon me if I mispronounced the last name. Company name, ARB, Apex Bank. Head office address. Then they give the address, the phone number, and the fax. Now, why did I sit there and show this, brothers and sisters? And calling this here, the hating of Africa must end, O house of Yisrael, is when you deal, for instance, in ancient Israel, you had it to where there was barter and trade between different nations. Solomon, king of Israel, bartered and traded with the people of Lebanon. Solomon bartered and traded, brothers and sisters, with different nations. Joseph was made a diplomat inside of one of the countries in Africa known commonly as Egypt. So what we are pointing out, brothers and sisters, is that you can't sit there and know yourself as an Israelite and having the understanding of such and then try to consistently try to take shots against Africans or against the African continent, especially if we are to know and understand that Israel, the land, is geographically connected to the continent of Africa. Now, the portion, brothers and sisters, when it says a wandering Aramean was my father, right? In Deuteronomy, what that is talking about, when you understand the translation better, it says basically a Aramean attempted to destroy my father. The Aramean that is talking about in Deuteronomy 26, brothers and sisters, was Laban, and who he tried to destroy was Jacob. So that's what that's talking about in that particular regard. This becomes important because the Arameans were later on called Greeks by the Arameans were called Syrians by the Greeks, right? So if we can know and understand that, brothers and sisters, you already know the maternal side of the Israelites, brothers and sisters, were Aramean women. And the paternal side, as we've gone over before, is Chaldean. So if the said Middle East is part of Africa, then by default, if you just want to use the term Africa as a generic term, the people that's of the Middle East in its original indigenous form, all right, would have been what? Known as what? In layman terms, Africans. You understand? And so this is something we want to point out in that particular regard. The Israelites, brothers and sisters of old, were not estranged from indigenous African people, such as the fact of Joseph feeding native Egyptians. So when you find, no disrespect intended, well, I don't even know if I can say it concerning this kind of line, when a person who knows himself or herself as an Israelite talking about, I'm not going to feed no African, and so forth and so on, you're not walking in the steps of Joseph, our ancestor, because Joseph fed Africans. When we read about Israel being a light to the nations, you're not going to be known as that light talking about, I'm not no stinking African booty scratching person. That's not being a light to the nations. You understand? So this is something, brothers and sisters, we want to point out for edification purposes, if we will. All right. Next thing, brothers and sisters, we want to sit there and talk about is the fact that in ancient Israel, all right, we already spoke about the aspect of Moses, and he was in the land of Egypt. We spoke about Joseph, and he was in the land of Egypt. Now, mind you, as we pointed out, Egypt is in Africa. We pointed out in other presentations, such as Israelites Know Some History Part 1 on this same particular channel, right, where they went back and forth between the Asiatic lands of the Levant, where Canaan and later on Israel was at, and the lands in Africa. So it's not so hard to figure out what we're talking about for edification purposes. You had in ancient Egypt Thutmose III that went up into where the children of Israel was at. You had Necho of Dynasty 26 of Egypt, an indigenous Hamite, an indigenous Egyptian, if you will, that went over into the land where the children of Israel was at. You had indigenous people of the house of Israel that formed the community as we went over previously, and what you call the southern part of Egypt, and what you call Yeb or Elephantine. So my point in going over all of that is just to show for edification purposes, the indigenous Hamites and the children of Israel were not that far stretched of in one's imagination. Yes, Yisrael was separated from the nations. When you read in Exodus chapter 11, verse 7, it says that the Most High don't put a difference between the Egyptians and Israel. You understand? So this is another point that we want to go over for edification purposes. Israel being separated from the nations meant that Israel was to be the top of the nations. And you're not going to be known as the light to the nations, to be the top of the nations when you're sitting up there taking vicarious shots and disrespectful shots, if you will, against people who are said to be of African descent. That's not how you're going to bring the people back into the Most High. The book of Psalms, it says what? That Ethiopia will stretch their hands toward God. So what we want to point out for edification purposes, as it says in the book of Malachi, that the Most High is great beyond the borders of Israel. You understand? The reason why Israel was chosen is because the Most High does as he pleases. So from Abraham, it passed on to Isaac, and from Isaac, it passed on to Jacob. You understand? So these are things we want to point out for edification purposes, right? So as this is stating, the hating of Africa must end, O house of Israel. What you're looking at there is a person who owns a bank in current Ghana. Ghana has their own currency. Nigeria has their own currency. You understand? Now, I'm not going to do this presentation and try to act as if there are not any people in Africa who just straight up hate the black man in the West. There are African people who disrespect the black man in the United States. One of the terminologies that they use is a term called akata, A-K-A-T-A. So when you, as a said black man in the West, when you hear the terminology of being called akata, they are actually disrespecting you. But they, brothers and sisters, don't see the light within themselves. You understand? So Africa, brothers and sisters, was never monolithic in culture. It was never all one culture throughout the length and breadth of that vast continent. You understand? So with that, let's go on, if you will, to the next part. Thank you. South Africa. Now, what you're looking at right there, brothers and sisters, on the right-hand side is pictures from Southern Africa or South Africa. Now, as pointed out as in the other picture, if we were to just sit there and look at that, we might just sit back and think, oh, that must be, where is it, somewhere in DC, or is it somewhere in Miami? We might sit there and think something like that. Come to find out, is actually as stated in continental Africa and Southern Africa. The person that you see in there, the lady, all right, on the left-hand side, brothers and sisters, is a person that comes from the Xhosa speaking people in Southern Africa. Now, let's point this out. Would we say that that person is what you call mixed? I wouldn't think so. because one of the saddest, unfortunate states between so-called black people in what we call the United States is they are some who feel if you are not ebony hue, if you are not blue black, so to speak, like Wesley Snipes or darker, then they swear that you must have some white in you. Meanwhile, correct me if I'm wrong, there were not white people looking for their black DNA. You always have black people trying to talk about, oh, I got Irish in me. I got Italian in me. I got this in me. I got that in me. Meanwhile, not realizing who in the world you are. You understand? And so, brothers and sisters, as been pointed out, the spirit and the genre for this presentation is due to the consistent disrespect that many Israelites have shown in regards to the rapper Nipsey's death. You understand? Now, on the other side, you had Israelites in history that actually had wars with indigenous Africans. So let's look at this for understanding purposes, right? Can we sit there and say, for edification purposes, the Philistines were Hamitic? That would mean by default, Goliath was a Hamite. Do we understand that? That Goliath was a Hamite, brothers and sisters. With that being the case, and David going against Goliath, right? David, in layman terms, caught a body of a Hamite. Now, when you hear the terminology, which is the street terminology, by the way, called catching a body, that means you put somebody to death. You understand? David put a Hamite to death, brothers and sisters. He also went against other Hamites, such as the Jebusites. He also went against other, which you will understand as Asiatic nations, such as the people of Ammon and the people of Moab, as well as the people of Esau. So, brothers and sisters, when we're looking at this particular aspect, this is something we want to point out and understand. Many of the Israelites who are talking online against Hamites do not have the spirit that David had to go and quote unquote catch one for the house of Israel. You understand? Many of the same Israelites who are talking against the rapper Nipsey's death, talking about he was a stinking African, not realizing Israelites in history were called Africans by the same Europeans who called Hamites Africans. One more time for edification purposes. The terminology Africa and Africans was applied to that place by Europeans. You understand? So knowing that particular thing, the Israelites were also called Africans in many, many cases. And if you don't think so, you can go to a book, brothers and sisters, called Before the Mayflower by LaRon Bennett Jr., where they listed the black men coming off the slave ship as Ethiopians. Ethiopia is in Africa. So these are things we want to point out for edification purposes. Do you know, I found out when I was in college that there are droves and droves of white people that's moving to places like South Africa and Kenya. While they'll tell you, you just stay and try to struggle and make it in the hood, the white man is going over to Africa in droves. Did you know that? He knows what's over there, and we're going to go over some of the things that is over there for edification purposes. All right, next slide, please. Now, Kenya. This is, brothers and sisters, the people referred to as like the Maasai or so. Correct me if I'm wrong in part of the tribe. Because when I was researching it, I ran across a lot of information. Now, the reason why I chose this picture here, right? The reason why I chose this particular picture here is because what is the difference in the men that were jumping there and the men that were jumping like Anthony Mason, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Patrick Ewing, John Starks? Remember them from the basketball era? You got to be able to jump a certain amount of feet in order to be able to dunk the ball inside the hoop, even in quote unquote American sports. So when you find, and I state this again, and the reason why I'm doing this particular presentation, Everyone in Africa is not an Israelite, and everybody in North America is not an Israelite that's black. There are Hamites that are black that's in the United States, and there are thousands of people who are black that are Israelites in the continent of Africa. So when the Most High has spoken about scattering Israel among the nations, brothers and sisters, the closest nations that Israel would have been scattered among would have been what? The Africans. This is why I pointed out about David going against a Hamite, an African by the name of Goliath. The Philistines come from the line of Kaphtorim. The people of Kaphtor, right? They come from the line of Mizraim. The Patrusim that you read of in Chronicles, brothers and sisters, that's in southern Egypt. That's where the Israelites was living during the time of Jeremiah the prophet. Do you understand what's going on? You do know that Jeremiah died in what we call continental Africa. Jeremiah didn't die in Germany. Jeremiah did not die in England or in Scotland. You understand? Jeremiah died in continental Africa in a place that is understood as Egypt. So, brothers and sisters, this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. On the other presentation, I suggest brothers and sisters to watch, called Simeon and Dan, we went extensively about the scattering of Israel into places within what we call Africa. Now, what you're looking at on the right-hand side, brothers and sisters, is part of the area of Kenya, part of the area of Kenya today. Right? So let's go on, if you will, for edification purposes. Hotels in Ghana. Now, the young one that you see in there on the left-hand side with the head wrap on, I have a question to the Israelites. What is the difference between a head wrap and that young one right there and the head wrap that you see Israelite sisters wearing inside the camps? Even in what you call messianic camps, you find the women dressed similar, like I used to see in an Old Testament camp I grew up in, with the similar kind of wrapping and so forth and so on. What is the difference between such? You know what made Israel stand out? Was their customs, not their look. You know what made Israel stand out in the ancient nations? Shabbat, the Sabbath. That's what made Israel stand out. And if you didn't think so, all you got to do is signing that book again called Valley of Dry Bones, brothers and sisters, by Root of Windsor. Right? He stated that in the 1670s, when the so-called Falashas were being observed by the Portuguese, they were saying, wow, these guys here, they're doing things that seem to be, you know, more so biblical, you know, once it comes down to that kind of thing. So looking at it, brothers and sisters, in that particular regard, we have to begin know and see that the hating that you find many Israelites online doing about Africa, saying certain things, I don't want to use profanity, but I'm not no bleeping African, and so forth and so on. And if you're not part of the chart, the 12 tribe understood chart, then it's saying that there's no way for you to sit there and see any kind of salvation. Not realizing that the white man could not gather each and every single Israelite in the Atlantic slave trade. Just as much as you find Israelites to this day in the land of Israel, to this day, that state they were there since the days of Joshua, the son of Nun. Did you know that? You know there's a place in the land of Israel, current Israel, and a place they call Old Jerusalem, where there's a black man saying this is his land, and that the people of Israel were chased out of the land of Israel to Africa, and from Africa taken to the United States. There is a video, and I'm going to put the link of this in the description. You understand? So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes, right? You cannot, as an Israelite, sit there and understand what Isaiah is talking about when it says to be a light unto the nations and sit there talking about I'm not no African booty scratcher. That's not being a light to the nations. That is an ignorant person under the age of 10 years old making fun of Haitians in Brooklyn in 1986. That's what you sound like. Because I remember hearing when cable came out and was popular, oh, HBO stands for Haitian body odor, I'm not that. Why were Black Americans, quote unquote, so-called Black Americans, made to sit there and hate on Haiti and people of Haitian, quote unquote, Haitian descent? Let's explain why. You had a guy named Bookman. You had a guy named Toussaint Overture. You had a guy named Dessalines who brought havoc to the European man. Did you know that? Did you know that the black man in America in slavery rose up because of what they heard? Because many could not read, but what they heard was going on in a place called Haiti. So it behooved the European enslaver to try to divide the Black American and the West Indian. That's what they did with the Marcus Garvey movement. When Marcus Garvey came to America, as they say in Jamaica, going to the States, as they say in the West Indies. You understand? They told the black man in America, those people are violent and they're witches. Then they told the black people that came from the West Indies, the Black American, he's lazy and he's shiftless. And there were people who had jobs that would be coming from places such as Trinidad and Tobago and St. Lucia and St. Martin and so forth and Barbados. You understand? And realize how they were being treated different by the European manager than was said the Black American. All of that takes you back to the Willie Lynch letter. I experienced that. And I thank the Most High for the eyes that I have to be able to see how wicked that creature is. You understand? I, a quote unquote Black American, knowing myself as the house of Israel, you understand? There was a manager in a building, and every time he spoke to my coworker that was from Haiti, he would try to sit there and make more conversation with him than with me. So I am supposed to feel, oh, he doesn't talk to me. How come John, the manager, doesn't want to speak to me? The hell with John. Because John is the one that brought syphilis to Africa. John is the one that brought Christianity to Africa. You understand? John is the one who sat there and brought these diseases and spread them throughout the earth. And if you don't think so, there's a book written by William Campbell Douglas called AIDS, The End of Civilization. In a book you can get on Amazon. It's called AIDS, The End of Civilization. Spoke about how the people of the Europeans, the white man, was injecting children in Africa with AIDS. HIV is the beginning stage of AIDS, human immunodeficiency virus. But they'll tell the medical world in America that it came from a monkey biting an African man in that behind. That's ridiculous. Monkeys don't get HIV. That's why it's called HIV. The H is called human. Monkeys and cats don't get AIDS, brothers and sisters. And for those who didn't know, all you got to do is sit there and read and study about how the AIDS virus has been shown to not be in the people who tested positive after they went on a holistic diet. Because see, what AIDS does, it attacks the thymus gland within your system. Once you begin to build your thymus gland up, it doesn't have as much weight. When a person, unfortunately, does have that unfortunate virus, what happens eventually, they get a condition known as lymphoma. Lymphoma is when your lymph nodes begin to swell up in your body. So when you have that kind of situation, your body is letting you know, something is wrong. So all you got to do is read your body and understand what in the world is going on. And brothers and sisters, not to mention no names, but I know of a person who took red clover, which is an herb, golden seal, which cleanses your blood, and soma, which cleanses your lymphatic system and boosts your immune system, and their T cell count went skyrocket high. I repeat one more time. The AIDS virus attacks your thymus gland, where they say where your T cell count is at. So when it gets beneath 20, they say that's when you have then been diagnosed with the AIDS virus. So when you look at that particular aspect, brothers and sisters, you can begin to build up your thymus gland by studying about that particular thing. I state one more time. I know a person who began to take what they call red clover, golden seal, and suma, S-U-M-A. You can get that out of GNC in Manhattan. You understand? And that person's T cell count went skyrocket high. So these are things. Let me explain. Maybe everybody that come in at a certain time. Brother, when I said John, I don't know when you came in, Ak, into the presentation. I was talking about a particular white man that I was right. See, that's what I mean. See, when I said John, maybe you might have thought I was trying to talk Old New Testament stuff. No, when I said John, I was talking about a white man I used to work around when I was 26, and how he tried to place the Haitian guy over the Black American guy. You see, that's the difference. So when I talked about John, right, that's what I was talking about. But I'm going to get back to the presentation that we're talking about right here. Now, when we're going into this particular part right here, when it says hotels in Ghana, right? This is a part of how it looked and looks. All right, so we're going to get back into this particular aspect right here so we can understand the point of this particular subject matter, right? And that's this. You cannot, as an Israelite, brothers and sisters, when a guy that was in Africa that was slain, or from Africa that was slain in California, sit there and try to be an opportunistic teacher by saying, yeah, he was a Hamite and he was this and he was that. Brothers and sisters, that's not the portion of the house of Israel. If we understand the role that happened with Joseph, he was used, as it says, to save many alive. That's what he told his brothers. Don't sit there and be upset with yourselves that you sat there and sold me here, because Elohim sent me here to save many alive. So you got to understand the point of a matter. Why was Joseph sent there in the first place? He matured to understand what it was about. So when you find, unfortunately, online, and I state this not trying to talk gangster or anything of that sort, you will find many Israelites who will not even have the heart that David had. David put several Hamite people to death, from Goliath to the Philistines, brothers and sisters, right on down to the Jebusites. Many of the brothers and sisters who try to sit there and take shots against the guy Nipsey, who was a rapper who died, will be some of the same people not trying to be funny, might be feeling away because this said, quote unquote, let's just say the rapper Nipsey is a Hamite. Hypothetically, could be speaking. Let's just say that. And when he died, there were people saying that he was going to try to speak with law enforcement about getting rid of the gangs. Let's say, brothers and sisters, that guy Nipsey was a Hamite and he was trying to sit there and rid the people in his particular living quarters of unemployment and the other good things that they said of him. Would it take a person all the way from Western Africa or Eastern Africa at that to come to the United States to sit there and help the black man? Let's just say, brothers and sisters, that Nipsey the rapper okay, was a said, quote unquote, Hamite or a real Hamite. We, the Black American man, should feel ashamed that somebody from Eastern Africa had to come to California to help us. Where are we falling behind that somebody from Eritrea that's not even 40 years old had to sit there and be the one to be known to sit there and say, let's talk about Dr. Sebi here. Let's talk about getting rid of the gangs there. What are we doing for our sons and our daughters? What name are we making? This is where we got to sit back and think. See, Joseph, he made a name for himself. Abraham made a name for himself. Yaakov made a name for himself. Moses made a name for himself. Dawid made a name for himself. We who understand ourselves as the house of Israel are not matching up to the standard of our ancestors. Do we understand that? We are not matching up to the level of our ancestors, because nowhere in the entire Tanakh do you sit there and find a citation like you find in the Talmud against people of Ham. The Talmud in Judaism teaches you, brothers and sisters, that Ham had big lips because he told a lie, and that he turned black for one reason or the other. So in my other channel, Mora Yeshaya History Lessons, when the Jewish guy tried to sit there and cite Rashi, I was like, no, Rashi was a racist. You got to come with something better. You understand? Know what you're citing for edification purposes. All right? So we want to sit there and go over this for edification purposes. The Labadi Hotel. The price to get to Accra, Ghana, from April 27th to May 11th, staying at the Labadi Hotel is $4,481. This, brothers and sisters, is in Ghana. And as you can see, we want to point this out. I want to highlight that part, if we will, right? Labadi Beach Hotel. And I'm going to circle it for people so they can begin to see what in the world I'm talking about. All right? Labadi Beach Hotel, as we see here. That's in Ghana. But what do they show us? Poverty, no growth, no vegetation, no stability, crime-ridden. Now, what's the difference between what they show Black people and other people in America about Africa? What's the difference between that and what they show white people about Black people in Detroit? Let's break this down. There is a video on YouTube of this Caucasian guy going through what he called the rough streets of Detroit. And the only thing the people were doing in these quote unquote rough streets was dancing, drinking, and chilling at night. Even when he went through that video for more than 5 minutes, there was no F-bombs, no F-bombs, no B-word, no S-word. There was no profanity in that entire video from the people. And in the video, it's on YouTube, going through the rough streets of Detroit, you know? Detroit is right in the United States. So they're presenting a lie on the internet about our people, just like they show Black people in Africa in one particular aspect. This is why I remember bringing a situation more to New York, right? I was in Brooklyn one night, for those who know New York, right? I'm on Nostrand and Fulton on a Saturday night in the summertime. So brothers and sisters, anybody who knows that area, Nostrand and Fulton in the summertime, on the Saturday nights, everybody is outside. It was after Shabbat. I was with some other Israelite brothers. Everybody is outside at that time. and they had these two cops, Caucasians, that looked like they just came out the academy, that looked like they didn't even, quote unquote, catch a collar, that is to say, even lock anybody up, and that's where they sit there and put them at. That's crazy. You understand? It's the impression that's given that people who don't sit back and take the time to sit back, hold on. The same one telling me bad about Africa, that is poverty stricken and disease stricken, is the same one that is saying that the Black Americans are on welfare all the time. I can't trust you because I already seen you a liar about the people in the same borough I was raised in. All these pictures you see here is from Google Images. I didn't fly to Africa and take these pictures. These hotels and these ritzy places that you see in what they call, quote, the dark continent exists. We want to point out the word labadi in Hebrew means by myself. Thus saith the Lord, thy Redeemer, and he that formed thee from the womb. I am the Lord that maketh all things, that stretch forth the heavens alone, and spread abroad the earth by myself. Ko amoya, go aleka, yo zeraka, mi baten anokiya, ose ko no te shemayim labadi. You see that word right there highlighted there in the red? Labadi. That's the Hebrew word meaning by myself. Coincidence? That same word is used here for the hotel that's in Ghana. Is there a connection? I don't know. But let's go on for edification purposes, so we can gain some understanding. Golan Heights in Israel, in Ghana, West Africa. Temperature in Ghana in December is in the 70s. Temperature in Israel in December is in the 60s. So what are we talking about, brothers and sisters? What you're looking at right here on the top is part of the Golan Heights in the land of Israel. The Golan Heights is in the land of Manasseh of ancient Israel. And down here, brothers and sisters, is Ghana. Why did I point this out in this particular PowerPoint? Simple. Brothers and sisters, the Israelites and the people indigenous to Africa, the Most High made the difference between nation and nation. But it was in the deeds of the people, not the look of the people. You understand? You had Israelites that went back and forth between Egypt and Ethiopia. You had Hamites that was living adjacent to the Israelites. Samson's wife was a Hamite woman. And what I want to point out on the other side, if we will, because the other understanding is, well, Joseph had a Hamite wife and Moses had a Hamite wife, so we can have a Hamite wife as well. Yeah, if you want a problem. Because there's too many of the daughters of Yisrael in existence for the sons of Yisrael to want a Hamite woman. You don't have to go there. We're not Joseph, where there's no other Israelite women around you. You understand? So this is something we want to point out. Next slide. Nexxus in Ethiopia. The Nexxus hotel amenities, right? Being that I travel a lot, I look these kind of things up about these kind of aspects. Room service, restaurant, airport transportation. This is in Ethiopia. They will sit there and have us to believe everywhere in Ethiopia was us a big desert of no land, and everyone was just dropping dead left and right. That's what they say about the black man in Chicago. They're poor and poverty stricken, and them niggas is constantly shooting each other. So the same lies that's being told to people of color in the United States by the European are also the same European people that's feeding the black man in America about lies about Africa. That's why, though I personally never been to Africa, I can say, being a person who travels more, that broadens your horizon and your mindset. But you're not going to get that just by only listening to YouTube. You're not going to get that, brothers and sisters, by not having an understanding and a clear mind on something. You understand? So this is something we want to point out. Part of its amenities is laundry service / dry cleaning and a shuttle bus service. So they got airport transportation. For those who may not understand, airport transportation is when they generally pick you up and drop you off to and from the airport. A people who is shown on the shows, come save the children, and everybody is poverty stricken. I'm not saying, as pointed out later, that poverty is not there. I'm saying we have been lied to. That's what I'm saying. There are some people who do not know about this other, quote, this other part of Africa. Just as much you got black people in the United States that are poor and poverty stricken. When that situation happened with the basketball team, I believe the name of the team was called the Clippers, right? And there were, believe it or not, dozens and dozens and dozens of black people who are millionaires that was going to look for that to buy that basketball team. You know where they live in the United States? Arkansas, Utah, Arizona, Colorado. There are black families in the United States that live like the Cosby Show portrays. You understand? This is something we want to point out for edification purposes. If you sit back and look and think of the black man, woman, and child in America, we want to sit back and think about the Cosby Show aspect is a real show. Oh, that bleep is fake. And that's why we continue, as Isaiah says, a seed of evildoers. From one generation to the next generation to the next generation of foolishness. You understand? So, this is something, family, that we want to point out. And we're going to point out more things about the aspect of the Africa they don't show you. And I say this in due respect, brothers and sisters. Right? If we, as the Israelites, as you see this picture here, if we had a camp that was like that in America, you know we would be in love with it. You know that, right? If we had a camp in New York or anywhere else in the United States that looked like one of these hotels that we're going over, we would sit there and say, yes, good thing. That's why it's titled, The Hating of Africa Must End, O House of Israel. Right? All right. Ethiopia and Queens. As a frequent flyer, a user of airlines, and gaining what they call sky miles, I want to point out that flying is not bad. Flying is not even very expensive. For those who are afraid of flying, it is understandable. There are ships that go to places as well. We see the airport in Ethiopia and the airport in Queens. Once it comes to business, it is what it is. Ethiopia and Queens has poor places. All one has to do is take the bus to see what areas in New York are such. What you're looking at right here, I'm going to sit there and circle this here in black as you see there. That's in Ethiopia. And what I'm going to sit there and show here, brothers and sisters, is Kennedy Airport in Queens. So as you know, you see Ethiopia's airport and the airport in New York. And I remember when I was going on a flight one time, they had a flight that was going to Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. They wouldn't be going over there if it was just 100% poverty, poor stricken. That is a lie that we have been told. You understand? Next slide. The Caleb Hotel in Ethiopia. The price of this from April 27th to May 11th is $1,734. The Caleb Hotel in Ethiopia, as you see here. Not being funny, it looks like some of the places better than the hotels, at least from the front, that I saw being in New York. You understand? You know Caleb is a Hebrew word? Does anybody know what the word Caleb means in Hebrew? Does anybody know? What does the word Caleb mean in Hebrew? I'll give you a hint. It's an animal. Yes, thank you. The word Caleb means dog. That's what it means, right? So, brothers and sisters, you do know that in Ethiopia, there was a Hebrew leader by the name of Caleb, right? Study Ethiopian history about Caleb in Ethiopia and see if you don't run about the Hebrews in Ethiopia. This is why studying is important. That's why getting information is important. That's why research is important. You understand? So, brothers and sisters, let's go on to the next slide. The Nexxus Hotel, Ethiopia, not all dirt. Now, why did I point this out? Is because that there's an understanding that all Africa basically is a dirt road where the people, as we were saying, have poverty, and such is not the case. You understand? So looking at that in that particular regard, brothers and sisters, it's not all poverty, because this doesn't show poverty. You understand? That's another thing that has been told that is a falsehood. Next slide. Addressing the ignorance. The sad and unfortunate presentation of Africa as a whole, as a worn down, torn down, AIDS-infested place is a myth. Though there are places that are poverty-stricken in Africa, we must present that is not the whole sum of the continent. The attacks on Africa are ridiculous, ranging from there are no Hebrews there, to Africa produces no fruit, to America is older than Africa, 2, Africa is the land of the dark continent. We want to point out that not all places are the same, and Africa is a continent, not a country, and was never monolithic in thought or culture. So what's the point, brothers and sisters, in going over that particular aspect, right? Is this. There are places within Africa, yes, that are poverty stricken. There are places in the United States that are poverty stricken. There are people that, even when you read in the Bible, it says that the Most High has lifted me from the dunghill and sat me with the princes of his people. You understand? The similar reasons as to why there's poverty among our people in the United States and in other places, such as the West Indies, is simply because of the lack of uniformity and unity. That's why. You understand? There are people that are saying that there are no Hebrews in Africa. And others saying that America, I've heard this before too, that America is older than Africa. No, it's not. No, it is not. Whether you go to biblical understanding or if you even try to venture off into what they call their science, what they refer to as Lucy was found in Kenya. You know, Lucy, they say, was the first woman that they found on Earth with these so-called bones and skeletons. They said that is to be found in Kenya. That's in Africa. You understand? So this is something, brothers and sisters, and I don't go that aspect. You understand? But I'm just using that for edification purposes. The first country, as we're going to point out, mentioned in Africa is Ethiopia. So the aspect in the hating on Africa, and when I say hating, I want it to be known and understood. I'm speaking about it in the quote unquote street terminology of your son is hating. Yes, there are those who actually sit there and hate on Africa. Most of them don't travel. Most of them don't have a passport. Most of them have not been to certain places. You understand? And so this is something we want to point out. And I have not been everywhere in the earth, but I wanted to show that there are places in continental Africa that don't sit there and look like what they show you in the Save the Children videos. You understand? Let's go on to the next slide. Minerals, fruits, and animals people use from Africa to survive. Gold, uranium, cement, lead, zinc, diamond, salt, copper, coltan, tin, emerald, aluminum, limestone, marbles, gemstones. Let's stop there. You know, gemstones was used on the breastplate of Aaron. This is why I'm addressing the house of Yisrael. Did you know that gemstones was used on the breastplate of Aaron? When they was in the Sinai Peninsula, where were the Israelites get the instruments to make the breastplate of Aaron unless they digged into the mountains and into the rocks and into the ground in the Sinai to dig up the minerals that's in there? The Sinai Peninsula is, even before and after the making of the Suez Canal, part of continental Africa. So let's understand what we're saying in kind of like other terms. The gems and the stones on the breastplate of Aaron can be found coming out of Africa. So when we sit there as Israelites and try to sit there and not understand that the earth belongs to the Creator. So when you're sitting up there talking about, well, F Africa, you're saying, excuse me, F the work of the Most High. That's what you're saying. To our black brothers and sisters who love to drink coffee, do know and understand that coffee comes from Ethiopia. You want to understand that? Coffee comes from Ethiopia. You know the stuff that they drive around in Manhattan and bring it to Dunkin' Donuts and bring it to the McDonald's and bring it to Burger King and bring it to the hotels that we have a coffee making machine. The rubber that comes from the Congo. Read about what happened with Leopold in the 1800s when they used to sit there and get the rubber out of Africa. There is a book called The Scramble for Africa, in which they actually, brothers and sisters, were dealing in taking things up out of Africa for their own purpose. Nobody, and I'm not trying to knock the earth that the Most High made, but nobody, correct me if I'm wrong, had to go and steal and do negative bartering with Europeans for European aspects. The Europeans came over here in the West and spoke with a forked tongue. You understand? The Europeans came over into Africa and spoke with a forked tongue. Who went to Europe, brothers and sisters, to dig into the earth in Europe to sit there and bring things back that America and with its indigenous and Africa with its autonomous people here did not already have? Why do you think the Bible talks about in Leviticus 19, when you have fruit, you let it drop off for the first 4 years so it can later on produce to you its richness? The European man is not connected spiritually or linguistically to Leviticus 19. He calls it the Old Testament for a reason. He can't understand Leviticus 19 saying, let the earth yield its strength by having the fruit fall to the ground for 4 years. Don't eat it. Then later on, you can have it, that it may produce to you its richness. The European man wants to take the first thing to sit there and come. You're not letting it develop itself. So there's no disrespect intended. It seems as if perhaps what we just went over, the same mindset of many Israelites who want to sit there and disrespect Africa, are some of the same mindset that would tell you you can sit there as a 38, 37-year-old man and have a 15, 14-year-old wife. Unfortunately, there are Israelites also teaching that foolishness. Her body, you pervert, has not developed to become a woman yet. Just because a woman has a female, we want to emphasize, just because a female has her menstrual doesn't mean that she is ready to be penetrated, to become impregnated. Get a woman. The Most High brought a woman to Adam. There was an order. Eve was not a child. Eve was not a child, you pervert. You understand? So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. The whole concept and ideology, the whole concept and teaching, you understand, of a grown man sitting up there 34, 35, talking about he can get a 12 and 13-year-old girl is a European concept, not us. And they just sit there and try to pass that off with the little girls because they know, especially sadly to say, the black man was not the father in the home. So therefore, she sits there and looks for love anywhere she can get it. These are things we want to point out for edification purposes. Next part, let's go on. Marula, banana, coconut, guava, grapefruit. You know coconut is good for kidney stones. You know banana is good and potassium. And in many cases, as shown, it grows in Africa. And as you see there, there's a part there, marula, that I believe many people have never heard of. And I highlighted that and bolded it for a reason, and we're going to see why as we go along. Goats, sheep, buffalo, antelope. There is a thing called the African buffalo when you research, among many other animals. Do you know, brothers and sisters, that the Bible talks about goat milk to sit there and heal certain kinds of aspects? Did you know, brothers and sisters, that the animals the Israelites were permitted to eat were animals that were not aggressive? And that there are rules and regulations that go along with eating meat in the house of Israel? Next part. Apple tree, Albizia terugina, or Albizia terugini, depends on how one may want to pronounce it. Wild malua, peppermint, confetti bush, wild sorrel, among many more herbs and medicines come from trees. Ezekiel chapter 47 in the Bible says that the trees will be used for medicine to the house of Israel. One more time. Did you know Ezekiel 47 mentions the trees about being medicine for the house of Israel? So let's see, brothers and sisters, the aspects, all right, and I want to change the color of this, as to why these two things were highlighted. Pardon me. I'm going to erase that part, right? Marula and Albizia terugini, or terugina. Sorry if I mispronounced it, but we see what it is there. Now let's see what this is so we can gain understanding of what we're talking about. Marula and the other thing called Albizia. Okay, let's go on. Marula oil is actually sourced from the hand-picked fruit. So Africa does have fruit of the marula tree, native to southern Africa and Madagascar, and has a number of benefits for the skin, but it's also helping to change the lives and strengthen communities. See, that's the part of Africa they don't tell you. And this is marula that we're seeing right here, circled in the black on this side here. It helps the skin. You know where they sell marula at in America? Places like Macy's for the white woman so she can get rid of her wrinkles. Did you hear what I just said? Do you know where they're selling marula oil at? In places like Macy's department store, so the white woman can use it to get rid of her wrinkles. And it comes out of Africa. And what are we doing? Sitting up here being disrespectful, talking about F Africa. The white man knows not to say F Africa. He knows what's in there. You understand? Let's go on. Some of the most impressive health benefits to Albizia include its ability to relieve stress and anxiety. Do you know why many of the brothers and sisters who burn trees or smoke marijuana, you know why many of them do it is because of anxiety? Many of the brothers and sisters who smoke marijuana, it is not because you want to sit there and get rid of gout or cancer. You know good and well when you're rolling that up, whoever you may be, inside that paper and put the burner or the lighter to it, you are not sitting up there thinking about no cancer. Many people may not even realize, well, this just makes me calm down. This makes me chill out. You're getting rid of anxiety that you may not even have known that you had. And that's part of its purpose in the first place. You understand? So let's go on, right? Relieve stress and anxiety. We need that among us, real talk. Improve symptoms of depression. Stimulate the circulatory system. So all them clogged arteries from all them years of eating pork in Trinidad and ham hocks in North Carolina, brothers and sisters, not necessary to have to go there. all of what they called in Jamaica, the pulled pork with oxtails and rice and beans, and all of the stuff when they make the mumbo pot and jumbo pot in South Carolina that has everything from vegetables to ham hocks. There are things in this earth that can cleanse your arteries, such as this. That was the point in going over this kind of aspect. Reduce signs of aging, prevent certain chronic illnesses, help digestive issues. So when you're sitting up there, brothers and sisters, dealing with the aspect of liver stones, gallstones, kidney stones, and so forth and so on, these kind of things don't have to be, brothers and sisters. Lower cholesterol. You know good and well what? Pork is high in cholesterol. Prevent respiratory distress. So before we see emphysema from the consistent Newports, from the consistent Black and Milds, brothers and sisters, we might want to go into the homeopathic and herbal aspect. And I'm not perfect myself, those who know how I am. I got much work to do in regards to the health thing, as far as my diet's concerned. You understand? Because personally, I love, not to get personal, I love fried fish. You understand? But ancient Israel used to bake their food. That's why Exodus 20, pardon me, Exodus 16 says, bake that which you will bake and seed that which you will seed. Boil and baking was the custom in ancient Israel, not frying food. So I'm not here to try to take shots at any brother, sister, elder, or child, because I do love my fried fish. But we need to sit there and step the bar up from stop saying I'm not no quote unquote effing African, right down to sitting up there talking about I don't want to sit there and eat healthier. We have to do better, brothers and sisters. You understand? And eliminate inflammation in various parts of the body. Eliminates inflammation. You know how this kind of connects what we're talking about? It's understood that rapper who was killed, murdered, Nipsey, was going to do a presentation about the doctor who I believe was also murdered, named Dr. Sebi. I believe Dr. Sebi was murdered too. He spoke about inflammation and how it exists only in mucus, and that no disease can survive without mucus being present. The Bible in Psalms 51 says, cleanse me with hyssop. Hyssop, brothers and sisters, gets rid of mucus out of your membranes. Do you see how all of this connects? So when you're saying F Africa, this is what you're saying. F, getting rid of inflammation. F, getting rid of respiratory distress. F, lowering your cholesterol. F, getting rid of chronic illnesses. That's why the guy who wrote another book by the name of Lila Africa said Mr. and Mrs. Negro ate themselves to death. There's a book out by an author named Lila Africa, and the book title is Mr. and Mrs. Negro ate themselves to death. The Bible in Ezekiel chapter 3 says that the children of Israel will eat the bread defiled in the land of their captivity. So we have been eating polluted bread. Leviticus 22, verse 25, teaches us we're not supposed to offer the bread to the Most High from the hand of a foreigner. The Most High doesn't want the priests of Israel to go to the Arameans, to go to the Philistines, to go to, and let's go there, the Jewish man to get the challah bread and rave it up. The Most High in Leviticus said that's not acceptable. Leviticus chapter 22, verse 25. It says there is a blemish in what comes from the nations to be offered before the Most High. when the so-called Falashas, who call themselves Beta Yisrael, was being fed food in Jerusalem on Shabbat, they spit the food out. Did you know that? After what they call Operation Solomon in the 1990s, they gave the children of the Falashas, who call themselves Beta Yisrael, they gave their children food, and the children ate it and spit it out. Brothers and sisters, our people were spitting the food out in the slave ship, so we wouldn't sit there and eat what they called the food of the white man. Do you see where we're going with this? The concept that many Israelites are presenting is not in line with the lessons that Joseph left on record. We're no different in many cases in that regard than the Pharaoh who did not know Joseph. You know that's what Exodus says, right? And the Pharaoh did not know Joseph. Do we know Joseph that we read of? Save this for the rainy day. Save this for the dop. Stop spending everything at one time. Save this for the rainy day. And if you don't trust yourself to save it yourself, let someone who you trust and respect hold it. Did you know that? If you know, as it says, not that everything is about money. Solomon said, a fool in his money quickly departs. Solomon said, a fool in his money quickly departs. So if you know that you're not good with money and you know somebody who is trustworthy, you know what? I'm still working on that. You hold that for me and you give me when I need it, and I'll let you know when I need it. That's building, brothers and sisters. That's building, brothers and sisters. You're not building talking about I'm not no effing African. That's not building nothing. If you can trust somebody to hold your money, you know good and well that is a person that you can build with, because everybody ain't trustworthy in that department. Joseph said, Potiphar's wife, Potiphar let me touch everything up in here except you. Joseph was what? He was head of that house in that regard. Joseph was trusted in the house of Potiphar. Would we, the descendants of Israel, like Joseph was a descendant of Israel, can we be trusted in each other's houses? Or are you going to try to steal the brother's book and act like you didn't know you had it? These are things, brothers and sisters, we want to talk about for edification purposes. When the Most High created everything, it says in Genesis 1:31, Tov Me'od, very good. This is part of the creation of the Most High, that which was called very good. Now, conclusion and final thought. I got this picture from online. I typed in Sword of Levi and Lion of Judah, and this is what came up. I didn't want to use all the ones with a cross. So I don't do the cross thing. So I picked the image that I thought would be closest to what is safe, you understand, to use, right? Now let's look at this here. Lewi, and I'm going to put Yehuda in a different color. Yehuda color, correct me if I'm wrong, on the breastplate is red. Or, yeah, right? Okay. Lion of Judah and the sword of Levi. This is supposed to be some kind of aspect of the showing of the breastplate. Now, conclusion and final thought. House of Israel, stop hating on Africa. Israel, and final thought, we're making ourselves look like a bunch of fools when you're sitting up there saying that Nipsey getting murdered is because he was a, quote, heathen Hamite. While at the same token, not having the same spirit that David had to go out there and defeat a Hamite for the armies of the living God, named Goliath. Nipsey wasn't perfect, neither is anybody else. But Israel, what does it say? In the book of Numbers, chapter 12. If there be a prophet among you, I speak with him in a vision. I speak with him in a dream. Israel, in Numbers chapter 12, the pedigree of a prophet was either one who was going to be telling the future by either having a dream from the Most High or a vision from the Most High. Israel didn't deal with naysayers in the scriptures. After something done happened, you want to sit there and play judge. Well, he was killed because he was a heat. No. Yisrael were prophets. Not everyone, but Yisrael dealt with prophets. That's why when we went over the thing called Israel, No History, Part 3, we read Jeremiah, the 28th chapter, about the issue between Jeremiah the prophet and Canania the prophet. When Canania gave a date talking about the king of Babylon will not be ruling over you in 2 years, at first, Jeremiah was like, so be it. Yes. The Most High told Jeremiah, no, I did not send Hananiah with that word. Go back, Jeremiah, go back and tell them, do not sit there and trust in that lying word. And Hananiah the prophet was slain. So what are we dealing with, brothers and sisters? When we can sit there and see that Solomon dealt in business with nations that were Hamites. When we can see, brothers and sisters, that the children of Israel did not look that vast different than your average standard Hamite. And you're saying that that person is a, quote, booty scratcher. That is the same foolishness that children on the cheese bus, the yellow school bus, used to talk about in 1986 and make jokes. There are grown, I'm going to keep the language clean, there are grown men among the Israelites that are saying the same silly statements that was said by little children on the school bus going to elementary school. That's what happens when you stay at a novice teaching. That's what happens when you stay at a certain level. Once it comes down to teaching for the novice, you don't expand. Joseph expanded. Dawid expanded. Shlomo expanded. Daniel was in the midst of Hamites and Japhites with the Medes and other Shemites with the Persians. Nehemiah had rank, brothers and sisters, during the era of the Persian Empire. Daniel, as we already spoke of, had rank at that particular time. Prior to that, Moses, while in the heart of the land of the Hamites, had rank, as it says he was known greatly in the land of Israel. You understand? So, brothers and sisters, it's not too hard to figure out what we're talking about for edification purposes. You understand? Are there any questions or comments concerning this presentation? Questions or comments concerning this presentation? Now, what we're going to get into, brothers and sisters, concerning this kind of aspect about the lies that has been told to Black people in the Western Hemisphere about Africa. We want to go into, as before, but with more information about the lies that the Black man in America, Africa, Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, Brazil, and Belize has been told. Next slide. The matter of gold, Bible, and slaying the ignorance. The name of the first is Pishon, and that which is compasseth the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold. And the gold of that land is good. There is bdellium and the onyx stone. See where Havilah is pointed out? Right there. That's the river. This is here where the 8 looking thing is. That's Saudi Arabia. Havilah is said to be here, even south of the Kush part. See? That's what we're talking about. Next slide. The Hebrew book on Lulu.com. The Deuteronomy book on Lulu.com. You can get this book here on Lulu.com and this book here as well on Lulu.com. You can go there and you can type in Yeshaya Yisrael, or you can go in and type in the title and you can purchase the book that way. Now, this is a map shown from online. All right, somebody did ask, for my studies, the origin of the hateful ideas on Africans, the Talmud, what do you think? Some of it is, and then some of it is just straight Negro ignorance and foolishness. Some of the aspects does come from the Talmud, yes, such as him being cursed with being black. You can read about the writings of what happened with Rashi concerning that kind of aspect, right? But what I was addressing, I do thank you for that question. If I'm saying your name right, Takia, sorry if I mispronounced it. Is the Israelites who go online, YouTube and otherwise, and want to just sit there and disrespect Africa as a whole and people in Africa as a whole. All right. These 2 books you can gain by going to Lulu.com. Now, this map here, as we is asked, how this not part of Africa, but this is. No, the Canaanites are not the Canaanites are not European groups. All right. I'm gonna type in this right here. That video, I'm addressing somebody for those who are just wondering what's going on inside of the chat. And I thank you for that question as well. That the Canaanites were in part some of the people of the Hamitic nations. They're not Europeans as we see the Europeans that you see, say the average quote unquote a white man said no. So just wanted to point that out. There's a video on this channel called Simeon and Dan. And in that I talk about the aspect of the people of Canaan. So hopefully that helps out for edification purposes, right? So when we look at this right here, how this not part of Africa, talking about where the land of Israel, former Canaan was. But this is, you know the distance from this land to the mainland, continental Africa, is greater than this land to this land. You can walk back and forth from Egypt, which is in Africa, to where Israel was. Many have done it. You understand? There's no way when you're studying about the diaspora of Israel that you're going to sit back and think that the European people are the house of Israel. Nah, not by a long shot. You know, so that's why they're going to promote aspects of rabbinic sage writings in order to sit there and make themselves feel a part of it. What do I believe of the Canaanites? The people of the people, pardon me, the people of the Canaanites, first off, in many cases, was annihilated from the earth because there were 11 different aspects of the people of Canaan. Some of them, like Sodomites and Gomorrah, for instance, was just totally obliterated. Like the people of the Babylonians, just totally obliterated. So when we look at, as the person asked me, what do I believe of the Canaanites? Many of them migrated into certain parts of Africa. There is a people in Africa that call themselves Canaan, and it's spelled as this. All right, Canaan. There is a people in Africa calling themselves that to this day. So that's what I believe to answer the question in that particular regard. When the Europeans came into what you call the Middle East of today, many of the peoples that were in the Levant, Israelites and others, migrated and scattered into places within continental Africa. Let's go on to the next slide. The truth. Let us go in. Genuine people versus fake people. Genuine. Express their opinion openly. Fake. Gossip. Genuine. Respect everyone. Fake. Only respect people with power. Genuine or authentic. They don't try to get people to like them. Fake. Manipulate people into liking them. Genuine or consistent. Fake. Change with the weather or when you are no longer useful to them. Genuine are not attention seekers. Fake. Crave attention. Need it all the time. Genuine don't brag. Fake are constantly bragging and showing off. Genuine always try to live up to their promises. Fake make commitments they never intend to keep. Genuine are happy for other people's success. Fake resent other people's good fortune and tend to be jealous and resentful. I just put that there for edification purposes, so we can see the difference between genuine people and fake people. Let's go on, if we will, to the next slide. Now, this is what I'm talking about earlier, right? When they want to sit there and as they showed all the time a mythological Africa to the world, so do they concerning the black man in America show a mythological aspect of what happened with us in slavery. The first slave owner in America was not only a black man, he went to court and demanded it. In 1654, let's remember that date, it was time for Anthony to release John Casa, a black indentured servant. Instead, Anthony told Casa he was extending his time. Casa left and became employed by the free white man, Robert Parker. Anthony Johnson sued Robert Parker in the Northampton court in 1654. In 1655, the court ruled that Anthony Johnson could hold John Casa indefinitely. The court gave judicial sanction for blacks to own a slave of their own race. Thus, Casa became the first permanent slave, and Johnson the first slave master. Now, remember this meme? Because we want to point something out. That's not Anthony Johnson. That's a man named Lewis Hayden. They just took that picture, threw it in there, and typed some words, not thinking that, Negroes, thought I was going to say another word, that Negroes were going to study. No, I don't use the N-word in full citation on this channel no more, because I was told off by an elder about how that's not the wisest way to present yourself. But I don't longer use that. Okay, now, getting back into the point of this here. It says Anthony Johnson sued Robert Parker in the Northampton court. That's in Virginia. Where's Northampton? Hampton, Virginia, in 1654. Then it says the courts gave judicial sanction for blacks to own a slave of their own race. The court. Was it a black man ran court? Nope. See, they didn't think people was going to sit back and really read this. Like, hold on, what are you telling me? The first permanent slaveholder in America was a black man. Wrong. Blade, part 1. Ready, set, on your mark. Let's see. Where did they get the picture we see here from? This is dated to the era of the 1650s, but it was not until the 1820s that pictures were taken with cameras, and it was first notably done by Will Harrison in the 1840s when John Quincy Adams, the son of the second president, John Adams. See how much history is just right there? See, Amin is not going to go that hard into that subject. Let's go on. From Washington to Monroe, their images were made in sculptures or paintings. Who painted the image we see of this Johnson? Washington had slaves since the age of 11 in 1743, and Andrew Jackson, who had the issue with the Supreme Court concerning the, quote, Trail of Tears, had slaves, he being the 7th president. Jefferson had slaves. Johnson, the successor of Lincoln, had slaves. Lincoln, after 20 Native Americans lynched in one day, he fired Fremont, who freed the slaves in Missouri. Queen Isabel and Martin Van Buren, Queen Isabel of Spain, that is, and Martin Van Buren were both in agreement that blacks should be enslaved. This being around the era of the Amistad in 1839. President Wilson in the White House showed the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, as good Americans. In the era of Roosevelt, a black woman was not allowed to sing in the White House. So it says, so they showed the lady singing outside the house. President Buchanan was a said homosexual who sided with the South in the area of slavery. Lincoln did not want slavery to expand, nor to be eradicated totally. The 14th Amendment to the Constitution allows the government to have those who are incarcerated to become slaves. President Kennedy did not help black people. He deceived black people. Former President Carter attempted to pacify blacks during the situation with Trayvon Martin in Florida. Let's go on. The former governor of New York, named Patterson, tried to pacify blacks in the time of the Sean Bell verdict. The politicians don't like blacks. Do we see what's going on here? The politicians don't like black people. So the lady that they have there posted as the spokeswoman against the Democratic Party, Candace Owens, who sat there online and said she's a supporter of Trump because Trump supports black people. Miss Candace Owens, you're not for black people. Didn't you see what Trump did with Omarosa? Is Yisrael a homeborn slave, as is asked in the book of Jeremiah? Why is Candace Owens, a black woman, up there talking in front of Congress, talking about she's a supporter of Trump? The same dude who sat there and did not know that Puerto Rico is part of the United States. How are you a good president, a politician, when you don't know what you're the president of? The president is one who presides. If you don't know the landmass that you are the president of, you need to be made to step down. You don't know what you're doing because you don't know what you got control of. You understand? All right. I'm gonna read what the person typed. A book called The Mediterranean Peoples, a study of the phone, the origin of Europeans by Gillespie, Giuseppe Sergi, gives evidence of Canaanites being an archaeological record across Europe. So my question then is, does that book speak about the black people in Europe as being the Canaanites, or that when we speak of Europeans as the white man we see like in Manhattan or Miami or so? That's my question. No, that's not what that portion is talking about. When it says about moving them out with the Hornet, it has nothing to do with them being moved over into Europe. Because by the time when you read about the aspect of the people of ancient Canaan, they started out black and turned white. Well, that's a whole nother theory. Because the people of Canaan, as we were pointing out, which is absolutely nothing to do what we were talking about right here in this part. But I did want to address the person who commented right here. They started out black and turned white. So now let me ask you a question. This book that you were talking about inside of the chat, right? Does it address them as being black and turned white? And did the language of these people of Canaan transform into the language of these white people that they became? Because linguistics and etymology is another way to trace how a people move. That's my two questions right now. Then we're going to go back and read this from the beginning because this was getting into a whole nother subject. And then I'm going to sit back and wait for this. What I'm asking in a nutshell is this book that you're talking about, does it say one, linguistically, they can connect the languages of the people of Canaan to the European languages? And is the modern white man, aka the European, the ancient Canaanites? See, because even if you look at the Arabs who told the Jewish people, like that's in Egypt, I think the guy's name was Ansar Sadat. Pardon me if I got the name wrong, right? Now that has no Jeremiah 13 about the leopard changing spots. That has nothing to do with that, if that's what you're talking about. Does Jeremiah 13 even address the people of Canaan? I'm trying to see where this is going. All right. No, I understand. You're saying that you're presenting information that you found after extensive study. So what I'm asking is the book that you cited, right? Does it address the linguistics aspect of the people? Let me give an example. Like I cite the book Hebrewisms of West Africa. That author states that people of the tribe of Judah went into places like Ghana. And the author leads into the aspect of saying, like the Ashanti say God's name is Nyame, Nyame or Yame. They are also saying in that same book, right, that Yame can also be said as Yahweh. That's one understanding that that book presents as far as linguistics goes. The book also gets into the aspect of saying that the Ashanti people in Ghana, in many cases, can be traced back to the people of ancient Judah, because Ashan was a land in the tribe of Judah. And Ashan in Hebrew itself means to smoke. So that's the linguistics in certain cases with that. Right. But people, Jeremiah 13, my brother or sister, is not talking about the people of Canaan. So, right, what I'm asking is a direct question in regards to what was being posted in here. Because when I do a presentation, I stop and I say, are there any questions or comments? So if there's any, I would like to sit there and engage, and I feel free, hopefully, to be able to ask about the information that's being presented. As I ask people to critique or speak about or give their advice about what I'm presenting, I'm doing the same thing and engaging the audience in this particular aspect. Right? All right, I'll tell you what. We're going to go back to where we were at in this presentation and get into what we were talking about. We were, okay, addressing this meme, brothers and sisters, that's a lie. And just as we were told lies, brothers and sisters, about Africa, so are people from Africa told lies about us over here in America. And this is one of them that it says here, Anthony Johnson, the pioneer of American slavery. All right. But let's look at this right here as we were reading. The 14th Amendment, and I'm going to show this with the laser pointer, if we will. Okay. The 14th Amendment of the Constitution allows the government to have those who are incarcerated to become slaves. President Kennedy did not help Black people, he deceived Black people. Former President Carter attempted to pacify Blacks during the situation with Trayvon Martin. The former governor of New York, Patterson, tried to pacify Blacks in the time of the Sean Bell verdict. The politicians don't like Blacks. And that was the point in this. All right. There is a point in these PowerPoints and presentations. All right. So now looking at it, brothers and sisters, once it comes down to this right here, we want to sit there, right, with the time allotted, because we're going to end this, all right, at 10 p.m. because we don't want to go too long. All right. Look at the highlighter. We want to highlight some of these names. Queen Isabel, Martin Van Buren, right? Lincoln, Washington, Andrew Jackson, Jefferson, Johnson. Let me explain why I did what I just did for those looking into the chat. Nobody is perfect, and I might get flack maybe from some for what I just did, but there's order to certain things, brothers and sisters. If I'm the presenter, and it's not about me, but if I'm the presenter and I'm asking a question because I see a comment that's being presented, and the question that I ask is not addressed, it's not to go back and forth with the other people within the chat asking, well, what question did you ask? That's what I just saw from the person that stated their stance concerning a matter. I was asked earlier, what do I think of the Canaanites and about their disbursement? I stated what I stated and what I understand to be true concerning the aspect of the Canaanites. It went back and forth, and a little bit went back and forth. All right? And then I don't know the gender of everyone in the room. Another brother or sister mentioned something about Jeremiah 13. And I was saying that had nothing to do with the Canaanites. Can an Ethiopian change his skin? The question is no, you can't change your skin. So now, after my question that I asked verbally was not addressed, you don't take it from the person doing the presentation to have your own kind of aspect going on in the same presentation. That will not be allowed. And it's not to talk tough. It's not to sit there and say my channel is the baddest or the best or nothing like that. But you cannot enter a presentation online. You certainly ain't going to do it in the white man college. That ain't happening. I taught in quote unquote the white man's college. You are not. going to sit there and go up in there and do that. When a person is doing a presentation, you are not going to sit there and go back and forth with that particular aspect. Once it comes down to that, I'm no longer addressing that matter. You have a good night. So that's what I got to say in that particular regard. I'm not arguing with somebody at 9:40, 9:50 in the nighttime. That's not going to be tolerated from a male or a female, from an elder or a child. You understand? And it's not to sit there and say my channel is the baddest. Yeah, it's the top notch. No, it ain't. There are channels much more better than mine. So if I already stated, brothers and sisters and elders included, that from what I understand, you don't go back and forth with the person. Well, where's your sources? You wouldn't do that in the camps, live stream or otherwise. You understand? So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. I asked that person a question, and I stated why I state concerning linguistics, like the example given from the book, a source about Hebrewisms of West Africa. About the Ashan, Hebrew word. Ashan was a land in Judah. Ashanti, in the language of the people of the Ashanti, correct me if I'm wrong, T-I in English letters means people of. People of Ashan. Ashan was a city in Judah in the Bible in Joshua chapter 15. So that's some ways that some people are connecting certain things. So if I'm asking you, whoever you may be, whoever you were, whoever you will be, brother, sister, elder, child, does the book that you cite show the linguistics pattern? Or was this a theory that some brothers did come up because the idea of the hornet and don't be, I heard that before years ago. I heard that particular teaching years ago, and they were black and they became white. You know who teach that? Dr. York. Dr. York said that the white man is the Canaanites and that the Jewish man is the Jebusites. He taught that. That teaching is not even only from Hebraic thought brothers. Dr. York, you know the one with the Nubians, he taught brothers and sisters that the Canaanites were white people. So this is why, brothers and sisters, I don't mind a person who might disagree. I don't mind stating my reasoning once it comes down to a particular matter. But as we stated before, respect trumps knowledge. So if you have a particular knowledge on a particular subject, we must remain respectful. You understand? And it is disrespectful if you are not addressing the person asking you a question, but instead addressing somebody else in the same chat. Shalom. Now let's get back to what we were talking about for edification purposes. All right, let's look at this here. Blade part 1. Now I wanted to sit there, right, and highlight certain things for edification purposes. President Buchanan, Kennedy, Carter, Governor Patterson. All right, President Wilson. All right, we had Lincoln already. All of these people here were leaders and politicians in their own right. Right? All of them did not have the people's mindset, the said black man, woman, and child's mindset to the best mindset. You understand? So now, brothers and sisters, when we look at this particular aspect, what I was getting into before that other situation happened, when you have a woman or a man going into the aspect as Candace Owens is. Talking about she sits there and defends Trump or likes Trump because he sits there and supposedly helps black people. There are black people help black people. What about them? You understand? What about that particular aspect? Trump has not helped black people. Trump was the one who said concerning the Central Park matter with the guys who were found to be innocent that they need to be put to death. That would have been innocent bloodshed. Had we been listening to Trump, Trump is the person, as you were pointing out, that did not know that he was the president of Puerto Rico, that he was not the president of the places we understand as St. Martin, St. Croix, and St. Tom. No, pardon me. St. Thomas, St. John, and St. Croix, not St. Martin. I stand corrected. What they call the Virgin Islands, he didn't know he was the president of that. I cannot rely on a person who is a said president who does not know the areas that he is supposed to preside over. So bye-bye with that kind of aspect. You understand? So what we were asking in here is, where did people get this picture from that we see here that I'm presenting as Lewis Hayden? You may want to look that up. Lewis. Lewis Hayden. All right? Look him up and see what you find, if that ain't the same thing that they try to say is Anthony Johnson. And look to see if Lewis Hayden was even in the 1600s. Okay, so, brothers and sisters, the first president to have his picture taken, photographed, was John Quincy Adams, and that's not even when he was president. In the 1840s, he wasn't even president at that time. And the person who did that film, taking that picture, was Will Harrison. So where did they get that other picture from that we see? Next slide. Blade Part 2, go. Remember what we saw right here? Blade Part 1, ready, set, on your mark. Or is it on your mark, set? Which one is it? I don't know. But let's go on. Let's go. William, a Dutchman in 1625, received a license to trade slaves in Brazil, Virginia, and New Guinea. Received a license. Note the meme said that Anthony Johnson is the pioneer of American slavery in the 1650s. Yet in the 1620s, we see one Dutchman as having a license to trade slaves in Virginia. Dutch in New York had slaves in 1646. In 1613, the Dutch made what is now Manhattan, which is a part of New York City, a slave port. The Dutch, before 1630, had slave ports in the West Indies. In the year 1768, Washington, you know President Washington, traded blacks as slaves between him and the West Indies. Pardon, that West is supposed to be capitalized. Did George Washington get the idea from Anthony Johnson? I doubt it. Anthony Johnson is said to be from Angola. We spoke about Angola earlier, didn't we? For those who were here in the beginning, you know? From the 1620s, the Portuguese and Dutch were dealing with blacks as slaves. Note, the meme says that Anthony Johnson was the pioneer in American slavery. Yet, he did go to court. But whose court did he go to? Who decided his claim? These are questions. I've asked this inside of a channel. Respectfully at that. When a white man presented the meme that we see here, there's a white man on YouTube who presented the same meme. And I asked some of these questions. You know, I didn't go back and forth with that white man when he was talking about something else. If he was trying to say that Anthony Johnson was the pioneer of American slavery, you know, I wasn't talking to him about the Germans and the French because they had nothing to do with the subject. The Canaanites had nothing to do with the subject we're talking about right now. You understand where we're going with this? Let's go on. Anthony Johnson was not the pioneer of American slavery, and the facts will show as follows. The Dutch, part 3, fatality. The truth wins. For those who understand, I kind of got that from the video game, fatality, you know, that kind of thing. I think it was Mortal Kombat. All right, but let's go on and close out, all right? Because I didn't mean to go past 10, but we had to deal with a situation concerning the chat. Let's go on. The Dutch had Axum slave port. They had Elmina slave port. The Dutch took the English slave port built in 1631 in the year 1665. Balboa had 30 blacks as slaves when he went to the Pacific Ocean. This being in 1513. Stop with the 1619 date. Cortez, in an issue with Mexico, conquest had 300 blacks as slaves. This being in 1519. Hold on, it gets better. When Alvarado went to Ecuador in 1534, there were blacks with him as slaves. The first slave ship to go from Africa to the Western Hemisphere was in 1518 to the West Indies, and then 1538 to Brazil. This becomes important because remember, we see that the Dutch and Portuguese were both involved in the slave trade. It was actually the war between the Dutch and the Portuguese in the 1600s that caused the blacks to go to form the stronghold called Palmares. So resistance against slavery in Brazil was dated since 1575. What are you talking about? Anthony Johnson is the pioneer of American slavery. South America, North America, it's still America. They're trying to sit there and take you to when Virginia was a colony, not when that same particular land was disrespecting black people in slavery. Let's go on. Wait, it gets better. Anthony Johnson was the pioneer of American slavery. Question mark. There were blacks as slaves in 1565 in St. Augustine, a place in Florida. St. Augustine is in Florida. College reference given upon request. But the meme dated to the 1650s says that Anthony Johnson is the pioneer of American slavery. Somebody ain't been studying. It was the English leader John Hawkins who helped England have slaves in the Caribbean. He entered the slave trade in 1562. He worked for Elizabeth I, born in 1533, the daughter of Henry VIII. But Anthony Johnson is the pioneer of American slavery? Question mark, lie, exclamation point. Robert Rich in 1624 had blacks as slaves in Virginia. He became the quote, Earl of Warwick. Get your history up. The memes are lies. I got into it with the college professor in City College about this subject. So I looked up the information. There is no way Anthony Johnson was the pioneer of American slavery. And brothers and sisters, giving honor and praise unto the creator and the maker of heaven and earth. Good night, Lala Told. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the comments. And I briefly just want to address that matter one more time. This is not quote unquote dry snitching or talking behind somebody's back or anything of that sort. But you do not except in Israel think that a person is going to go back and forth while the presentation is going on about another subject. When I stated there, I got into it in college with a professor. It was a white dude. I didn't interrupt him or try to take him off his course from what he was presenting. I disagreed with what he was saying. I made my point, and it's up to the people to understand whether they would take quote unquote either side or just disagree or not even care whatsoever. But you do not, and I want to state this for the record. The reason why I blocked that person and deleted the message is because if the question that I asked was not addressed, you do not address another person in the chat on a said person's channel. You can email, find out information about that person you care to speak with, but to go back and forth inside the chat while a person is doing a live presentation talking about something that had nothing to do with that particular subject is very disrespectful. That will not happen in a white man's college. I know that. You will be reported to the dean. And if they really wanted to sit there and go in, so to speak, you can be put on academic probation and you will not get your money back. You understand? I've been in trouble in the college for going back and forth with one teacher about a report I did. I'm not trying to say I am your more. I'm not trying to say I'm your teacher, you must listen to me. You understand? When I do the PowerPoint presentations, I invite certain people in Messenger on Facebook, and then I put it on 3 of the Facebook pages that I have. And I don't tag nobody in it. You understand? I know I've watched videos with Tariq Nasheed and see how that chat goes. I watch videos, brothers and sisters, even with the guy Sinetta, and see how that channel goes with the comments and so forth. It's sporadic. It's very fast, going back and forth. You understand? I've watched Michi X. I've watched the black woman on YouTube who talk about scrolling for the white man and see how that chat goes. You understand? I've watched Al Quan's channel. Just last night, I was watching that brother's channel about something that he was saying about Black Americans and politics. It's something that interests me, so I watched it. The title struck me. You understand? You can always click dislike. I do that to videos I don't like. That's not a problem. But if you have a Hebrew name and I have a Hebrew name, I'm not going back and forth who the Canaanites were when I'm talking about the black man in North America. That ain't even had nothing to do with the subject matter at hand. Now, at that particular point, we had moved on. And for those listening, you will notice I actually asked, are there any questions or comments concerning the presentation? Sometimes a person can ask a question from quote unquote left or right field. So be it. These things happen when you're presenting yourself and you're saying, giving honor and praise to the creator of heaven and earth. You don't know what energy might be coming back at you to a certain extent. People can have all kinds of questions from anywhere. But you got to know the difference between, as was pointed out, the difference between teaching and debating. And when you see that debate spirit, you block it. And with that, I say shalom.